I was on the living room floor when everything fell apart. Not with a bang, not with screaming, but with a single piece of paper, a child's drawing. Crayon lines that would expose secrets one of Vancouver's richest families had been burying for years, and I, the nanny, would be blamed for all of it. My name is Min Ji Park, and I worked for the Choi family for 8 months. 8 months that changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, truth, and even about myself. But in that moment, staring at Richard Choi's rage-flushed face, I didn't know I was about to uncover something that would make that man crumble completely. "You're teaching my son lies," he said, his voice low and dangerous. His fists were clenched at his sides, and I could see the vein pulsing at his temple. Lies about our family. I was holding Ethan's drawing in my hand, a simple drawing of a house, or at least that's what it was supposed to be. But there was something else there, something I hadn't noticed immediately when 5-year-old Ethan handed it to me with that proud smile that made my heart melt. "Mr. Choi, I started, but he cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Don't lie to me, not like she lied." She. He meant the last nanny, the one who'd left abruptly 9 months ago, without explanation, without saying goodbye to Ethan. The child had cried for weeks, and now I was beginning to understand why. Let me back up a bit. Let me tell you how I got here, standing in this glass and steel mansion in West Vancouver, holding a drawing that was about to destroy everything. Because sometimes the darkest secrets hide in families that look perfect from the outside. I'd arrived in Canada 3 years ago from Seoul with big dreams and a small suitcase. I worked in cafes, restaurants, anywhere that would cake me while I improved my English. But caring for children had always been my calling. There was something about the pure honesty of children that made me feel at home, even when I was so far from home. When I saw the Choi family's ad, I thought it was too good to be true. Korean-Canadian family seeking nanny fluent in Korean and English, generous salary, accommodation included, full benefits. It seemed perfect. And in Vancouver, where the Korean community is vibrant and strong, I thought I'd finally found my place. The interview was at their mansion, overlooking the strait and the snow-capped mountains beyond. It was October, and the maple leaves were exploding in shades of red and gold, that characteristic Canadian autumn beauty that still took my breath away. Mrs. Choi, who insisted I call her Sarah, was warm and elegant, with that way about her of someone born into old money. "Minji, you're going to love Ethan," she said, pouring me traditional Korean tea in fine porcelain. "He's a special boy, sensitive, creative. He needs someone who understands that." Mr. Choi was less present at that first meeting. He appeared briefly, shook my hand with a too firm grip, and disappeared back into his study. Later, I'd learn he was always like that. Absent, distant, controlling from afar. Ethan won me over on day one. He had those big, curious eyes that all Korean children seem to have, and a smile that lit up any room. "Do you speak Korean?" he asked in English, shy. When I answered in Korean, his whole face brightened. "The last nanny did too. I really liked her." "What happened to her?" I asked, innocent. Ethan's smile disappeared. "She went away. Mommy said she had to go home." But there was something about the way he said it, something that didn't ring true, even coming from a 5-year-old child. The first months were like a dream. I'd take Ethan to Stanley Park, where we'd run among the giant sequoias and feed the raccoons, even though we knew we shouldn't. We'd make tteokbokki together in the immaculate kitchen, making a mess of the marble countertops with gochugaru pepper sauce, while Sarah pretended to be annoyed but secretly loved it. I taught Ethan words in Korean, and he taught me Canadian slang I'd never learn in any English course. But there were strange moments too, little things that didn't quite add up. like how Sarah would tense whenever I mentioned taking Ethan to Korean cultural events, or how Richard would suddenly appear in doorways, watching us with an expression I couldn't read, or how Ethan sometimes drew pictures of people I never saw in the house. "Who's this?" I asked one rainy November afternoon, pointing to a figure in one of his drawings. We were sitting at the kitchen table while fat raindrops pelted the floor-to-ceiling windows, that constant Vancouver drizzle that locals barely noticed anymore. Ethan's crayon paused mid-stroke. "That's the lady from before." "Before me?" He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "She was nice. She used to tell me stories." "What kind of stories?" "Stories about brave people. People who told the truth even when it was scary." His voice got quieter. "Daddy didn't like those stories." I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I pushed it away. Kids had wild imaginations. I'd learned that in my 3 years of childcare. Sometimes they mixed up reality with fantasy, television with real life. It didn't mean anything. Except it did. I just didn't know it yet. The weeks rolled into December, and Vancouver transformed into a winter wonderland. The city went all out for Christmas. Lights strung across Robson Street, the big tree at Canada Place, carol singers on every corner. The Choi family decorated their mansion with an almost aggressive perfectionism. Real garland, imported ornaments, a 15-foot Douglas fir in the foyer that took a team of professionals to decorate. "We're hosting the annual charity gala," Sarah explained, directing workers like a general commanding troops. "All of Vancouver's elite will be here. Everything must be perfect." Perfect. That word haunted that house. Everything had to be perfect. The perfect family, the perfect home, the perfect image. But I was starting to see the cracks in that perfect facade, like fractures in expensive porcelain. Ethan had started having nightmares. He'd wake up crying, calling for me instead of his parents. I'd rush to his room, holding him while he sobbed about the basement and the secret room and the lady who cried. "There's no secret room, sweetie," I'd whisper, stroking his hair. "It's just a bad dream." But he'd shake his head violently. "There is. The other nanny showed me. She said I needed to remember in case something happened to her." Those words should have been a red flag. They should have sent me running. Instead, I did what any good nanny would do. I reported it to Sarah. That was my first mistake. Sarah's face went very still when I told her. We were in her private sitting room, the one overlooking the garden where winter roses somehow still bloomed despite the cold. She was holding a cup of coffee, and I watched her knuckles turn white around the delicate china. "Ethan has a very active imagination," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "The previous nanny, Jiwon, she filled his head with all sorts of inappropriate stories. That's why we had to let her go." "Let her go?" I thought she left to go home. Sarah's eyes met mine, and for just a second I saw something there. Fear? Warning? "That's what I said, Minji. She went home, back to Korea, quite suddenly. We were all very surprised." The way she emphasized surprised made my skin prickle, but I nodded, smiled, and let it go. That was my second mistake. I should tell you about Richard's study. It was on the 3rd floor of the mansion, a massive room filled with expensive art and even more expensive secrets, though I didn't know that yet. He spent most of his time there making the deals that had built his fortune. Tech investments, real estate, something about cryptocurrency that I didn't understand. He was rarely present for dinner, rarely played with Ethan, rarely even acknowledged my existence except for terse nods in hallways. But after my conversation with Sarah, I started noticing him more. Or rather, I noticed him noticing me. I'd catch him watching me with Ethan, his expression unreadable. Once I walked past his study and heard him on the phone, his voice raised in anger. I don't care what it costs. Find her. Make sure she understands what happens if she talks. I pressed myself against the wall, heart pounding. Who is he talking about? Jiwon? It had to be, but why would he need to find her if she's simply gone home? Why would he care if she talked? The charity gala was on December 15th. I wasn't supposed to attend, of course. My job was to keep Ethan upstairs, away from the glittering guests and their expensive charity. But Ethan had other plans. I want to see the party, he whined, pressing his face against the glass barrier at the top of the stairs. Below, Vancouver's elite mingled in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. A string quartet played in the corner. Champagne flowed like water. Your parents said you need to stay up here, I reminded him gently. But we can watch for a little while. And that's when I saw her. A woman, standing in the corner, partially hidden by a massive flower arrangement. She was Korean, young, maybe my age, and she was staring directly at me with an expression of desperate urgency. Before I could react, Richard appeared beside her. He took her arm, not gently, and guided her toward a side door. She glanced back once more, and I saw her mouth 2 words: "Help, Ethan." Then she was gone. "Who was that lady?" Ethan asked, tugging at my sleeve. "I don't know, sweetie." But that was a lie. I knew. Deep down, I knew. That was Jiwon, the previous nanny, the one who supposedly went back to Korea, the one who supposedly left without warning, except she was here, in Vancouver, at this house, looking terrified. Something was very, very wrong. I waited until Ethan was asleep before I did something incredibly stupid. I snuck downstairs. The party was still going strong, but I avoided the main rooms, sticking to the servants' corridors that wound through the mansion like secret arteries. I was looking for that side door, the one where Richard had taken Jiwon. It led to a wing of the house I'd never explored. Old Vancouver mansions were like this, built in the 1920s by timber barons and shipping magnates, full of odd rooms and forgotten spaces. This part of the house felt different, colder, darker. The expensive renovation hadn't reached here yet. I found a staircase leading down, to the basement, to the place Ethan had nightmares about. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I thought about Jiwon's face, about Ethan's nightmares, about that phone conversation I'd overheard. I thought about all the small, strange things that hadn't made sense. And I went down. The basement wasn't what I expected. It wasn't dark or scary. It was actually quite modern, recently renovated, with bright LED lights and smooth concrete floors. There were several doors leading off the main space. Most were locked, but one stood slightly ajar. Inside was an apartment, a small furnished apartment, and it was clearly occupied. There was a jacket on the chair, Korean fashion magazines on the coffee table, a half-eaten meal on the counter. Someone lived here. Someone who wasn't supposed to exist. You shouldn't be here. I spun around. Jiwon stood in the doorway, her face pale. Up close, I could see she'd lost weight since whatever photo Sarah had surely purged from the house. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. "You're supposed to be in Korea," I said stupidly. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what they told you? That I went home? What are you doing here? Why are you living in the basement?" Jiwon glanced toward the stairs, fear flickering across your face. "How much do you know about the Choi family?" "I know they're rich. I know Richard made his fortune in tech and real estate. I know they're respected in the Korean community." "You know nothing." She grabbed my arm, her grip desperate. "Minji, you need to leave this house tonight, right now. Don't pack, don't explain, just go." "I don't understand." "Richard Choi isn't who everyone thinks he is. His fortune isn't from legitimate business. It's from trafficking. He moves people, Minji, people like us, Korean women who come here looking for work, for opportunity. Instead, they disappear into houses like this, into basements, into lives they can't escape." The room tilted. I grabbed the counter for support. "That's insane. Sarah would never..." Sarah knows everything. She helps him. How do you think they maintain their perfect image? Their charity work? It's all a cover. They donate to immigrant rights organizations while running one of the largest trafficking operations on the West Coast. I shook my head, refusing to believe it. But even as I denied it, pieces started clicking into place. The locked rooms, the security cameras everywhere, the way Sarah tensed around other Korean women. Richard's phone conversation about finding someone and making sure they didn't talk. "Why are you still here?" I whispered. "Why haven't you gone to the police?" Jiwon's laugh was bitter. "You think I haven't tried? Richard has connections everywhere. Police, immigration, even the Korean consulate. The one time I managed to get to a police station, they called him before they'd even finished taking my statement. He picked me up personally, thanked them for finding my confused employee, and brought me back here. That night, he made it very clear what would happen if I tried again." "And Ethan? Does he know?" "Ethan knows more than they realize. Children see things adults try to hide. That's why I used to tell him those stories about brave people who tell the truth. I was trying to prepare him, to give him tools to understand what he was seeing. That's why they got rid of me, or tried to. Richard couldn't risk killing me outright. Too many questions. So he made me disappear in a different way. I live here now, in this basement, doing their books, managing the records of all the women they've destroyed. I'm a prisoner with a comfortable cell." Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Heavy, male footsteps. Jiwon's face went white. "Hide," she hissed, pushing me toward a closet. "If he finds you here, you'll never leave either." I squeezed into the tiny space, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he'd hear it. Through the crack in the door, I watched Richard enter the room. He looked different from the polished businessman upstairs. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly mussed, and his expression was cold in a way that made my blood freeze. "You saw you talking to the new nanny at the party." "I didn't say anything," Jiwon replied, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I just looked at her, that's all." "Looking is enough. You know that." He stepped closer. "We've been very patient with you, Jiwon. We've given you every comfort. All we ask is your silence and your service. Is that really so difficult? You've made me a slave." His hand moved so fast I almost didn't see it. The slap echoed in the small space. Jiwon stumbled back, hand flying to her cheek. "You're not a slave," Richard said calmly, as if he hadn't just hit her. "Slaves don't have nice apartments and good food and health care. You're an employee who made some poor choices and is now working off her debt. There's a difference." "My debt? I never owed you anything." "No. You used our services to get into Canada. You used our connections, our resources. Did you think that was free? Every woman who comes through our pipeline owes us. It's simply business. You should understand that. You went to university, didn't you? You're educated. This is just economics." I wanted to burst out of that closet. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do something. But I was frozen, trapped by the horrific reality of what I was hearing. This wasn't just abuse. It wasn't just trafficking. It was a calculated, coldly executed system, and it was happening in one of Vancouver's most respected families. Richard left eventually, warning Jiwon one more time to be smart. When Jiwon opened the closet door, I nearly collapsed. My legs had gone numb from crouching, but that wasn't why I was shaking. "Now you know. Now you understand why you need to run." But I wasn't thinking about running anymore. I was thinking about Ethan, that sweet, sensitive boy who drew pictures of people in basements and had nightmares about secret rooms. He was living in this house, being raised by these monsters. What would he become if no one stopped this? "How many?" I asked. "How many women?" "I've processed the paperwork for 43 in the last 2 years, but Richard's been doing this for over a decade. There could be hundreds. Most are moved through quickly, sent to other locations, other cities. Only the ones who cause problems stay here, like me. We need evidence, real evidence, something the police can't ignore, even with Richard's connections." Jiwon held her head. "I've tried, Minji. Everything is encrypted. The records I keep are coded. The payments are laundered through so many shell companies that even forensic accountants couldn't trace them. Richard's smart. He's been doing this long enough to cover every track. But I was thinking about something else, something Ethan had said. He showed you the secret room, didn't you, before they caught him? Jiwon's eyes widened. How did you know? He mentioned it in his nightmares. He said you showed him. He said you told him to remember. There's a room, a hidden office behind Richard's study. That's where he keeps everything. The real records, the ones that aren't encrypted because he's too arrogant to think anyone could access them, physical files, photographs, contracts, everything someone would need to bring him down. I found it by accident one day when I was cleaning. I showed it to Ethan because she trailed off, tears filling her eyes.
Can you get back in? Are you insane? If we're caught? We're caught anyway, I interrupted. You said it yourself. Richard won't let you leave. Eventually, he'll decide you're too much of a risk. And me? Now that I've seen you, now that I know, do you really think he'll just let me walk away? We're already trapped, Jiwon. The only question is whether we die quietly or fight back. I saw the moment something shifted in her. After months of fear and submission, after being beaten down physically and mentally, a spark of defiance flickered in her eyes. The gala will last at least another hour, she said slowly. Richard will be busy playing the gracious host. Sarah will be networking. The security guards are focused on the guests, not the family wing. If we're going to do this, tonight is our best chance. Then let's do it. Getting back upstairs was terrifying. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound made us freeze. But the servants' corridors were empty, and the noise from the party covered our movement. We made it to the third floor without incident. Richard's study was locked, of course, but Jiwon had kept her key from her time as nanny. Her hands shook as she inserted it into the lock, and I watched the hallway, ready to scream or run or fight, whatever it took. The study was exactly as I'd glimpsed it before, expensive and cold. Art that cost more than most people made in a year hung on the walls. Richard's desk was a massive thing of dark wood and leather. Everything was perfect, controlled, just like him. The hidden room is behind the bookshelf, Jiwon whispered. There's a mechanism. Help me find it. We felt along the shelves, pressing books, pulling volumes. My fingers were sweating, and I kept glancing at the door, expecting Richard to burst through at any moment. Then Jiwon made a small sound of triumph. There was a soft click, and the entire bookshelf swung inward. The room beyond was small, windowless, and filled with filing cabinets. Jiwon went straight to one, pulling out a thick folder. Inside were photographs, documents, spreadsheets, and the photos. God, the photos! Women's faces, mostly Korean, some Chinese, some Southeast Asian. Young women, scared women, women who'd been promised a better life and gotten a nightmare instead. This is it, Jiwon breathed. This is everything. Names, dates, locations. This could bring down his entire operation. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and started photographing. Page after page after page. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence. My phone's memory filled quickly, so I started uploading to the cloud, to every storage service I had. I sent copies to my email, to Jiwon's email, and to emails I created on the spot. We needed backups of backups. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Coming up the stairs. Coming toward the study. Jiwon and I looked at each other in pure terror. There was no time to get out, no time to hide. The footsteps were right outside the door. The door opened, but it wasn't Richard. It was Ethan. He stood in his pajamas, his stuffed tiger clutched to his chest, staring at us with wide eyes. Minji, what are you doing in Daddy's secret room? Ethan, sweetie, I started, but I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his father is a monster? But Ethan wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the photographs spread across the desk. His small face went very serious, and he walked forward slowly, like he was approaching something dangerous. That's the crying lady, he said, pointing to one photo. She was in the basement for a long time. She cried every night. I could hear her through the vents in my room. My heart shattered. This child had been living with this horror, hearing these women's pain, and no one had protected him from it. His parents had surrounded him with this evil and expected him to grow up normal. Ethan, Ji-won knelt down to his level. Do you remember what I told you? About being brave, about telling the truth even when it's scary? He nodded, solemnly. We need to be brave now. Your daddy has done some very bad things. Things that hurt people. We need to tell others about it so he can't hurt anyone else. Can you help us? Will daddy be mad? Yes, very mad. But sometimes doing the right thing makes people mad. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Ethan thought about this with the seriousness only children can muster when faced with adult problems. Then he nodded. I'll help, but we need to hurry. Daddy always comes to check on me before the party ends.
Out of the mouths of babes. This 5-year-old understood the danger better than we did. We scrambled to finish photographing the documents. Ethan helped, his small hands holding papers steady while I took pictures. It was surreal and heartbreaking and necessary. When we finished, we carefully put everything back, closed the hidden room, and left the study. Go back to bed, I told Ethan. Act like you never saw us. Can you do that? I'm good at pretending, he said, and something about that statement destroyed me. Of course he was good at pretending. He'd been doing it his whole life, pretending not to hear the crying, pretending not to see the fear, pretending his family was normal. Ji-won and I made it back to the basement. We were both shaking, adrenaline making us dizzy. But we had it. We had everything we needed. Now we just needed to survive long enough to use it. I'll contact my friend at the Korean-Canadian Times, I said, scrolling through my phone. She's a journalist. She's been trying to expose trafficking rings for years. If we can get this to her... You need to leave first, Ji-won interrupted. Get out of this house. Get somewhere safe. Then release everything. If you're still here when it goes public, Richard will kill you. I mean that literally, Minji. He's killed before. I've seen the records. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. Killed? Who? Women who tried to escape. Women who threatened to talk. There was one 2 years ago who made it to the police. She was found dead in her apartment 3 days later. Ruled a suicide. But I saw Richard's calendar. I know where he was that day. And I know what he's capable of when he feels threatened. I thought about Ethan sleeping upstairs in a house with a murderer. I thought about all the women who'd passed through here, who'd been used and discarded and erased. I thought about Ji-won, trapped in this golden cage, and about myself, about how close I'd come to being next. And I got angry, really, truly angry. Not scared, not panicked, but furiously, righteously angry. No, I said, I'm not leaving you here. We're both getting out tonight. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible. We have evidence now. We have power, and we're going to use it. I pulled out my phone again and started typing. An email to the journalist with all the photos attached, an email to the RCMP Human Trafficking Division, an email to the Korean consulate, to immigrant rights organizations, to every media outlet in Vancouver. I wrote it all out, explaining everything, attaching every piece of evidence. What are you doing? Ji-won asked, her voice panicked. If you send that now, then it's out. Then it's public. Then Richard can't hurt us without making everything worse for himself. He's been operating in the shadows. Let's bring in the light. My finger hovered over the send button. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. Once I pressed this, there was no going back. Richard Choi's perfect life would explode. His reputation would be destroyed. His empire would crumble. And probably he would try to destroy us in return. I pressed send. For a moment, nothing happened. Then my phone started buzzing. Replies, almost instantly. The journalist, holy shit, Minji, is this real? Are you safe? Call me immediately. The RCMP, this email has been forwarded to our Active Investigations Division. An officer will contact you within an hour. Other messages pouring in as the story spread, as people woke up to the nightmare hiding in Vancouver's elite society. It's done, I whispered. It's out there. He can't take it back. Ji-won started crying, not sad crying, but relieved, disbelieving crying. It's really over? We're really free? Not yet. We need to get out of here before Richard finds out. Grab anything you absolutely need. We're leaving now. We threw together a bag with documents, clothes, anything that might be useful. Then we headed for the stairs, for freedom, for the end of this nightmare. We almost made it. Richard was waiting at the top of the basement stairs. His face was sheet white, his phone in his hand, and I knew he'd seen the messages. Somehow, he'd been alerted. Maybe he had monitoring software on the house Wi-Fi. Maybe someone had tipped him off. It didn't matter. He knew. "You stupid, stupid girl," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I know exactly what I've done. I've exposed you. The police are coming. The media is coming. Everyone knows what you are now." "The police?" He laughed, but it was an ugly sound. "You think the police scare me? I own half the force. I've been paying off officials for years. You think a few emails change that?"
Maybe not, but you can't pay off everyone, and you definitely can't pay off the internet. I sent that information to news organizations across North America. It's been posted on social media. It's probably on Reddit by now. By morning, your face will be everywhere. And not as the generous philanthropist, as the trafficking scum you really are. I saw the moment he snapped. The carefully controlled mask he wore shattered, and underneath was something animal and desperate and dangerous. He lunged forward, hands reaching for my throat, but G1 was faster. She'd grabbed something from the basement, something heavy, and she swung it hard into Richard's side. He staggered, gasping, and we ran. Through the mansion, past the remnants of the party where confused guests were starting to notice something was wrong. Past Sarah, whose scream of rage followed us, out the front door and into the cold Vancouver night where snowflakes were just starting to fall. We ran until our lungs burned, until we couldn't hear pursuit anymore. Then we collapsed on a bench in a park, under streetlights, in public where Richard couldn't touch us without witnesses. My phone kept buzzing. The journalist calling, wanting the full story. The police asking us to come in for statements. News alerts as the story broke, as prominent Vancouver businessman Richard Choi, accused of human trafficking, began trending. "What about Ethan?" G1 asked suddenly. "He's still in that house." I'd been thinking the same thing. Child services will be involved now. They'll remove him from the home during the investigation. He'll be safe. Will he, though? How do you recover from learning your parents are monsters? I didn't have an answer for that. The truth is, Ethan would carry this trauma forever. But at least now he had a chance to heal, to grow up away from that toxic environment. At least now he wouldn't become what his parents wanted him to be. The police arrived an hour later. We spent the rest of the night giving statements, telling our stories, providing every detail we could remember. They raided the Choi mansion, arrested Richard and Sarah, and found 3 other women being held in various parts of the property. Women whose families had reported them missing months ago. Women who Richard thought he could erase. Richard tried to fight the charges, of course. His expensive lawyers argued everything was falsified, that I was a disgruntled employee, that Jiwon was mentally unstable. But the evidence was overwhelming. The women we'd freed testified. The documents couldn't be explained away. And Ethan, in child-appropriate interviews with trauma specialists, confirmed what he'd seen and heard. The trial took months. I had to testify, reliving everything, facing Richard across the courtroom while he stared at me with pure hatred. But in the end, justice was served. Richard and Sarah were both convicted. He got 25 years. She got 15, though she tried to claim she was a victim too, forced to participate by her domineering husband. The jury didn't buy it. As for the drawing that started all this, the one Richard had accused me of teaching Ethan lies with, I finally understood what it really showed when child psychologists analyzed it. Ethan had drawn the house, yes, but with all the hidden rooms visible, like an X-ray. He'd drawn the women in the basement. He'd drawn the truth that everyone else refused to see. His 5-year-old mind had tried to tell us what was happening, and we'd almost missed it. That drawing became evidence in the trial. It hung on the courtroom wall, a child's crayon testimony to the evil that had been living in that mansion. And it's why I'm telling you this story now. Why I'm speaking out, even though part of me wants to forget and move on. Because the thing is, Richard Choi wasn't unique. His operation wasn't some aberration. Human trafficking is happening everywhere, in every city, hidden behind respectable facades and charitable donations. It's happening to vulnerable people who come to places like Canada or the United States, dreaming of better lives only to find themselves trapped in nightmares. And it continues because people don't want to see it, because we're taught to trust wealth and status, to assume that rich people in nice houses couldn't possibly be doing horrific things, because victims are silenced, either through fear or force or lack of resources. Jiwan and I started a foundation after the trial. We use our experience to help other trafficking survivors, to train people to recognize the signs, to push for better laws and enforcement. It's hard work. And some days the weight of all those other women, the ones we couldn't save, feels crushing. But then I think about Ethan. He's doing okay, living with his grandmother now, far from Vancouver and the memories. His therapist says he's remarkably resilient. He still draws, but now he draws happy things. Superheroes, dragons, regular kid stuff. And every few months I get a drawing in the mail from him, a reminder that we saved at least one child from being destroyed by his parents' evil. The last drawing he sent me was of two women standing in front of a house, but this time the house was bright and sunny, with flowers in the windows. At the bottom, in his improving handwriting, he'd written, "Thank you for being brave." That drawing is framed in my apartment now. On days when the work feels too hard, when I hear about another trafficking case, another woman who wasn't as lucky as Jiwan and me, I look at it. And I remember why we fought, why we risked everything, why we continue to speak out. Because silence is how evil prospers. Silence is how men like Richard Choi operate for years, decades even, right under everyone's noses. Silence is what traps women in basements and erases them from existence. So I refuse to be silent. This is my story, our story, the story of how a billionaire's accusation led to the exposure of his own monstrous secret. And I'm sharing it because maybe, somewhere, someone else is seeing the signs, noticing the strange things, hearing the crying through the vents, and maybe they'll be brave enough to speak up before it's too late. If you're that person, if you're seeing something that doesn't feel right, trust your instincts. Document everything. Reach out to organizations that can help. And remember that people with money and power aren't automatically good people. Sometimes they're just better at hiding who they really are. The battle against human trafficking isn't over. It'll probably never be completely over, but every voice that speaks up, every person who refuses to look away, every survivor who shares their story, it all makes a difference. It all brings more light into those dark places where evil tries to hide. Richard Choi thought he could silence me by accusing me of teaching his son lies. Instead, his own son's truth brought his empire of lies crashing down. And that truth, that drawing of what was really happening in that perfect house, became the key to freeing dozens of women and preventing countless others from falling into the same trap. So, if you take anything from this story, let it be this. Pay attention to the children. They see more than we think they do. They understand more than we give them credit for. And sometimes their innocent drawings or nightmares or questions are trying to tell us something important, something we need to hear, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it shatters our illusions about the world. And if you're someone trapped in a situation like Jiwan was, like those other women were, know this. You're not alone. There are people fighting for you. There are organizations that can help. And there are ways out, even when it feels impossible. It took us months to escape, and we needed luck and courage and each other. But we made it. And you can too. The story of the billionaire who accused the nanny became a cautionary tale in Vancouver, a reminder that evil doesn't always look like we expect it to. Sometimes it looks like success. Sometimes it looks like respectability. Sometimes it looks like the perfect family in the perfect house with the perfect life. But underneath the perfect surface, there are often secrets, dark secrets, deadly secrets. And it's up to us to be brave enough to expose them, no matter the cost. Because the alternative, staying silent and safe while others suffer, isn't really living at all. It's just existing in the shadow of someone else's evil. I still live in Vancouver. I still work with children, though now I'm much more careful, much more aware of the signs of abuse and trafficking. I see Richard's mansion sometimes when I'm driving through West Vancouver. It was sold, of course, the proceeds going to restitution for his victims. A new family lives there now, one that hopefully doesn't carry the same darkness. And I think about Ethan growing up, carrying the weight of what his parents did, what he witnessed. I hope he'll be okay. I hope he'll grow into a good man, someone who fights against the kind of evil his father perpetrated. I hope that drawing he made, the one that exposed everything, will remind him that even as a small child, he helped save people, that his truth mattered. Because in the end, that's what broke Richard Choi, not my bravery or Jiwon's resilience or the police investigation. It was a 5-year-old's drawing. It was innocence exposing corruption. It was truth defeating lies. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. The truth always finds a way out. It might take time, it might require courage, it might cost everything, but eventually, always, the truth emerges. All we can do is make sure we're on the side that helps it into the light, rather than the side trying to keep it buried in darkness. So the next time someone accuses you of teaching lies, ask yourself, what truth are they trying to hide? What are they afraid you might expose? Because sometimes the loudest accusations are really confessions. Sometimes the people most desperate to silence you are the ones with the most to hide. And sometimes justice begins with a single piece of paper, a child's drawing, a truth told in crayon, a light shining into darkness. That's how empires fall. That's how evil is defeated. One truth at a time, one brave voice at a time, one person refusing to be silent at a time. This is my truth, this is my story, and I'm sharing it because somewhere out there someone else needs to hear it. Someone else needs to know that speaking up matters, that fighting back is possible, that even against powerful enemies with endless resources, truth and courage can win. Richard Choi is in prison now, where he belongs. The women he trafficked are healing, slowly, with the support they deserve. Ethan is growing up safe, and I'm still here, still fighting, still refusing to be silenced. Because that's what we do. That's how we honor the ones who didn't make it out and support the ones who did. If this story has affected you, if you know someone in a trafficking situation, or if you've seen signs of abuse or exploitation, please reach out to local authorities or organizations specializing in helping victims. Your voice matters. Your action could save someone's life. Don't let fear or doubt keep you silent. The world needs more people willing to speak truth, even when it's terrifying, especially when it's terrifying.
Because in the end, that's how we create real change. Not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, though sometimes those are necessary, but through consistent, persistent, courageous truth-telling, through refusing to look away from uncomfortable realities, through believing survivors and supporting them even when it's difficult. The billionaire thought he could control the narrative, could silence anyone who threatened his perfect facade, but he underestimated a 5-year-old's honesty, a nanny's courage, and a survivor's determination to not let another woman suffer her fate. And that underestimation was his downfall. So ask yourself, what truths are you avoiding? What uncomfortable realities are you looking away from? What could you do today to bring more light into dark places? It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be as simple as listening when someone shares their story, believing them, offering support. Small actions compound into movements. Individual voices join into choruses that can't be ignored. This is how we change the world, one drawing at a time, one truth at a time, one brave moment at a time. And together, we can make sure that stories like ours become rare exceptions rather than common occurrences. We can build a world where children don't have to hear crying through the vents, where women aren't disappeared into basements,
where truth triumphs over lies. That's the world worth fighting for. That's the reason I keep telling this story, even when it's painful, even when I'd rather forget. Because someone needs to hear it. Someone needs to know that escape is possible, that justice can prevail, that speaking up matters. And maybe that someone is you.